Sometimes it is possible to pinpoint a specific decision that changed the fate of a movie. You've probably already seen Rocket Jump's excellent video essay on how Star Wars was saved in the edit. But if you haven't, he talks about how Marshall Lucas added the story element that the Death Star was about to destroy the Rebel base on Yavin 4, suddenly raising the stakes of the whole climax. It's a prominent example of one decision that ended up saving the film and helping make it the cultural icon it is today. Well, I want to talk about a similar decision that saved the ending of another iconic film series. Like Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings is one of the most beloved film trilogies in history, but the early versions of the climactic Battle of the Black Gate included a scene that I think would have ruined not only Return of the King, but the whole trilogy. Now, if you're a die-hard Rings fan, you probably already know the scene I'm talking about, but if you don't, I'll get to it in a moment. But first, I want to talk about some changes to the Mount Doom climax, which runs in parallel to the Black Gate battle. Now, although the changes made here were significant, I don't think including the original version would have ruined the film. But I want to talk about them first because, like the big change, they show us the importance of understanding the core themes of your story and having those ideas guide every creative decision you make. So what was the small change? Well, it was made to this scene. Now, if you've read the books, you'll know that in the original text, Gollum simply slips and falls into the lava while celebrating finally taking back the ring. A version of this scene was filmed, but the screenwriters Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson felt that this was too anticlimactic. They wanted to have Frodo make a choice and have some agency in the destruction of the ring.
I never liked the idea of Gollum dancing with joy and then accidentally falling into the lava, which is basically what happens in the book. I just personally, I know why Tolkien did it and I know all the arguments for it, but I just never wanted to do that. I felt so strongly that Frodo had to be some part of it.
So they redrafted the scene and filmed it a second time, with Frodo running at Gollum and pushing him off the ledge, but falling in with him. This is how the scene went for pretty much the entire duration of the production, but Jackson and his co-writers were never fully happy with it. In particular, they felt uncomfortable with an ending where the main character intentionally kills another.
It's not quite fulfilling Tolkien's theme that it was sparing Gollum's life was what ultimately caused the ring to be destroyed.
They struggled with how to play this scene for so long, and they finally came up with the version that we know and love from the final film, where Frodo and Gollum fight over the ring and, in their desire for it, they fall over the ledge together. But it almost didn't happen at all. They shot this scene on Andy Serkis's last day of filming in New Zealand, and on Elijah Wood's second to last day. It truly was the last minute, and the last chance to get the most pivotal scene of the series right. This change shows how films get made once when they are written and again during production, but they're also made a third time, in the edit, and this is where another change was made to the Mount Doom scene. In the final film, the ring falls into the lava but remains on the surface. We cut back to Frodo hanging off the ledge, then cut back to the ring. Then we return to Frodo and Sam again and stay with them for a full 30 seconds, until Frodo grabs Sam's hand. Only then do we cut back to the ring one last time and see it finally get destroyed. The pacing and cross-cutting in this scene looks so obvious to us now, but originally the intention was for the ring to be destroyed, then we would see the collapse of Barad-dûr and the reactions from the Black Gate crew, and then we would return to Frodo and Sam on the ledge. Then editor Jamie Selkirk got his hands on it.
We thought, oh, that's not very good. We need to stretch that out a bit more. We've gone through a whole trilogy, a whole 3 movies. Couldn't just have it sort of happening like that, you know, you had to sort of milk it a bit.
Selkirk insisted the events run in parallel, and convinced Jackson that Frodo's decision in this moment, to let go and fall or to reach out to Sam, was tied to the fate of the ring, and to Middle-earth as a whole. And of course, he was right.
And the Oscar goes to James Selkirk for The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King.
The differences between the original screenplay for the Mount Doom climax and the final film are subtle, but I think both of these changes significantly improved the film. They show us how important it is to continually review and revise your story, particularly the pivotal moments. More importantly, they highlight the importance of making sure that every character and storytelling beat is consistent with the overarching theme of the narrative. Which brings us to the Black Gate, and the decision that, in my opinion, saved not just Return of the King, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a whole. See, in the early versions of the screenplay, when Aragorn leads his army to the Black Gate in an attempt to draw Sauron's attention away from Frodo, he was going to fight Sauron. Yep, Sauron was going to appear in physical form and fight Aragorn. And this wasn't some idea tossed around early on in the production. They storyboarded and even filmed the fight over 3 days. You may recognise this footage because in the final cut they replaced Sauron with a cave troll. You can actually still see the top of his helmet in a few frames of the final film. Now, before we talk about why including this scene would have ruined The Lord of the Rings, let's look at why it was included in the first place. This was Aragorn's final fight in the trilogy, and the screenwriters wanted to make the stakes suitably epic.
We also felt that Aragorn has come this distance with his journey, and that we had to somehow have this personal duel between Aragorn and Sauron, and that's not in the book.
It would have also finally made the trilogy's main villain be a physical force to be reckoned with.
We felt that we really had to do something more than just have Sauron staying in his tower as this flaming eye, that we had to have him make an appearance.
So that's why they included this scene. In the original screenplay, we would have seen the army standing before the Black Gates, and a white angelic figure would have appeared, mesmerizing the soldiers and Aragorn. It was Sauron appearing as Anatar, the visage he used when tricking the elves into forging the Great Rings of Power during the Second Age. Anatar spoke to Aragorn, but Gandalf urged Aragorn to look past the vision. Oh, Tolkien geek side note here. Anatar means Lord of Gifts, and while he succeeded in tricking Celebrimbor into making the rings, other elven lords like Elrond and Gil-galad didn't trust him. So it's at least thematically consistent that Gandalf, who not only bears one of the elven rings of power, but is also a Maiar like Sauron, would also see through the deception. Anyway, Anatar would have suddenly transformed into Sauron, as he had appeared before Isildur thousands of years earlier, and attacked Aragorn. The fight would have carried on in parallel to the climax between Frodo, Sam and Gollum in Mount Doom, much in the way it does in the final cut. Now, it should be clear to you by now that if they had included the scene in the final cut, it would have ruined the film, and in many ways the whole trilogy, but I'm going to explain why anyway, because like with the earlier scene with Frodo and Gollum, I think there's an important lesson here for filmmakers about understanding the themes of their stories, and making sure every creative decision is guided by those core ideas. So the first reason this didn't work was because although the movie is called Return of the King, this is not Aragorn's story. Most stories have an A plot and a B plot. Aragorn's journey is the B plot, and while it drives many of the key events in the wider world the story takes place in, the A plot of Return of the King and the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a whole is Frodo's journey. Now, Sauron is the main villain in both plots, so at first it did make sense to have a final showdown with him.
In the beginning we were following storytelling rules which have your showdown between your big hero and your villain.
But if you think about the story of the trilogy, Sauron isn't actually the antagonist. The ring is. The ring is what is important because the ring is the embodiment of Sauron's power and evil. The Lord of the Rings screenwriters understood this distinction. That's why in the prologue to the trilogy, they mention Sauron by name twice, while the ring is mentioned 14 times. The ring is the villain of the story, not Sauron himself, and the entire journey for the 3 films has been one of Frodo trying to destroy the ring in order to rid Middle-earth of evil. So for Sauron to take on a physical form again right at the end would undermine this entire story, as well as the power and influence of the ring that had been built up over the last 3 films. Besides, it would lead to so many questions. The obvious one, of course, being, what if Aragorn kills him? After all, we've already seen this once before. This is actually what was supposed to happen to him in the original storyboard. When Frodo destroys the ring, Sauron would explode in a blaze of light, at which point the audience would immediately wonder if he had actually been destroyed this time. After 9 hours of movie, you can't be ambiguous about something like that. So right from the start, the stakes of the fight would be unclear and confusing to the audience when you instead want them to be focusing on the characters. But for me, the real reason that this scene would have ruined the Return of the King was because it undermined the heroism of what Aragorn was trying to do. Aragorn, his soldiers, and what's left of the Fellowship are knowingly going to their deaths, not to confront Sauron, but because they have faith in Frodo and believe they can buy him some time. One of the central themes of The Lord of the Rings is this.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
The heroism here is not some epic fight with the main villain, but in the self-sacrifice. Aragorn may be descended from kings and be wielding the blade that cut the ring from Sauron's hand, but ultimately the fate of Middle-earth is in the hands of a hobbit and his gardener. What Aragorn is doing is accepting that no matter how powerful he is, or his army, Frodo is the only one who can save them. Aragorn is instead embodying Gandalf's immortal advice.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
It is not up to Aragorn to beat Sauron in combat. All he has to do is decide what he can do with the time that is given to him, and his decision to march on the Black Gate is how he can achieve greatness. Also, by making this scene about Frodo and not a big duel with the villain, Aragorn's act also embodies the other theme of The Lord of the Rings, friendship. The Black Gate scene embodies this in several ways. Obviously, there's this.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
And this.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
But there's also this moment where, after Aragorn leads the charge, Merry and Pippin are the next ones off the line, the two hobbits charging an army of orcs to fight for their friend. Again, they're not there to battle Sauron, they are there to help Frodo. So instead of some angelic vision and a totally unbelievable battle with Sauron, we instead get one of my favourite moments of the entire trilogy.
For Frodo.
I don't know about you, but I can't imagine not having that line in the movie. In fact, Viggo Mortensen proposed this addition.
But then it was actually Viggo himself that had the idea that the eye flares out, and just when you think that he's somehow being affected by this, he turns and he says, "For Frodo." And you realise that he's not affected by it at all, and it really worked quite well.
I just love this because it shows how much he understood the character and what this scene was truly about. Everything Aragorn is doing is
For Frodo.
Also, a fun fact about this scene, it was filmed in a military training area, so the ground was littered with unexploded ordnance.
This is a bomb. This is a rocket. All these things you might find out here. Don't touch them.
And we get out on set, and you're in the middle of fighting and stuff, and you look down, and sure enough, there's the fins of a bomb sticking out in the ground.
They had some tape cordoning off a certain area, but I said, does that mean that inside this tape we're fine? No, but there's less bombs where you are than on the other side of that tape.
Plus, most of the extras you see are actually New Zealand Army soldiers, because apparently the New Zealand military has nothing better to do than help make movies.
I want you to fill gaps, okay? Come forward, mate. Fill gap.
Filmmaking involves thousands of decisions. Most of them we will never know about, so it is rare for us to be able to point to a single decision that, had it not been made, would have ruined the ending of one of the most successful and beloved movie trilogies of all time. I'm so glad that Walsh, Boyens and Jackson decided to rewrite the ending of The Return of the King to focus on the core themes of the story. They showed that they understood what this scene was about, and more than that, they understood what Tolkien's whole story was about, and what he was trying to say by having the King of Gondor sacrifice himself for a hobbit of the Shire. Jackson himself acknowledged this in explaining why he decided to remove the scene.
It was not what Tolkien imagined, and we realised that was actually totally demeaning to what Aragorn was doing. The story was so clear as to what was happening that this was all about Frodo and Sam.
Well, in the words of the late great Christopher Lee,
Well, thank God for that decision.
thanks for watching, and a huge welcome to literally thousands of new subscribers. I've been totally blown away by the response to the rock video, and I hope to continue making video essays that you guys all enjoy. If you liked this video, then please let me and the algorithm know by subscribing, and I'll see you next time.